Hello and welcome back. This is Kavya and today we are going to learn about Block 2 Unit 4 case study of MPC005 research methods of MA first year psychology. The discussion here will be primarily from the point of view of exam preparation. So keep the textbook with you. And here I'll be discussing all those topics which have repeatedly come for the exams, and I'll also discuss few other topics which are important to understand the concept. The focus will be given to topics which have been repeatedly asked for the exams. So the focus is on exam preparation itself. Also the discussion will happen only in English so that it is easy for you to understand and reproduce the same in English in your exam paper. So this is the last unit in the block 2. So this is case study. So case study method can be applied on single subject, small or large groups, a class within a school, etc. And case study is an in-depth study, longitudinal examination of a single subject. It could be descriptive or explanatory. It's not different from a survey method. But instead of collecting data about few factors from a large number of units, the researcher makes an in-depth, intensive study of a single subject. Therefore, it is limited in scope, but it is more exhaustive and informative compared to survey. So it could be similar to survey, but survey is done on few superficial aspects over a large number of people, whereas case study is done in an extreme detail but on a very small number of subjects. So case study is a systematic and scientific way and the researcher can get a sharp understanding of why something happened. Okay, so in that way it is similar to an ex post facto research. So case studies can also help in generating and testing hypotheses. So it is a research strategy, empirical inquiry, and examines phenomena that happens in the real life context. So it could also, there could also be single and multiple case studies. It can also include quantitative evidence. It can have multiple sources of evidence. There could also be qualitative and quantitative research. So case study has been used as a method for in the field of clinical psychology to understand a patient's previous history regarding their mental health. One of the famous psychoanalysts, Sigmund Freud, has used case study method to assist subjects in solving their personality issues. So his detailed interview and accounts have been an excellent example of a case study. So case studies approach on reality and behavioral issues are primarily addressed and identified here, and subjective bias of the researcher can be a threat to objective data gathering and analysis in a case study. Various techniques that are used in case study include personal interviews, observations, psychometric tests, and archive records. Okay, and ideally case study provides variable and reliable results, so it is used as a important way of research design. Okay, so now we are seeing the criteria for selection of case study. This has been a repeated question. So when we are selecting the cases for case studies, we use information oriented sampling. That is, unlike all the other methods where we were preferring to use random sampling, here we use information oriented sampling. So researcher has some information and based on that the researcher chooses the sample. There could be some bias of the researcher that can come in, but mostly the researcher tries to be as objective as possible. So the cases, all the cases that we are choosing for a case study will be based on this information that the researcher has, and mostly these information is also based on extreme cases or typical extreme cases and typical cases. So in a case study, we don't really study the typical cases because typical cases is what is more common, which is the average behavior of a population. we are trying to study extreme cases. For example, if somebody has a extreme case of criminal activity, or somebody has an extreme case of photogenic memory or photographic memory, all of these extreme cases, and we'll be studying those. Okay, so average case is often not rich in information. So extreme cases reveal more information because they activate more basic mechanisms and more actors in the situation studied. So here it's given extreme case or a typical case, but in current trend we don't use typical to represent extreme. Divergent is the word that is used to define extreme, so I'm not using the word typical here. So I'm sticking to the word extreme cases and regular or common cases, okay, instead of typical cases or average case. So average case and extreme case, or average common case and extreme case is the term that I'll be using and not the term typical case. So it's often important to clarify the cause between a given problem and the consequences. So this is why, to identify the deep situations, that is why we are actually going for a case study. And random sampling will ensure that there will be more variation in the study, so we cannot get this kind of insight, which is why we need to do the information oriented sampling here. So it is appropriate to select few cases for their validity, but we don't always do a random selection here. So 3 types of information oriented cases are what forms the actual criteria for selection of a case study. So 1, it has to be critical case. 2nd, it has to be extreme or deviant. This was the word that I was saying earlier, extreme or deviant, and not typical. Okay, critical cases, extreme or deviant cases, and paradigmatic cases. So these are the 3 types of cases that we will be selecting for case studies, because these are rich in their information, and then this is not very common, and which is why it is important to understand why these happen, why these differences happen, and how to overcome these differences. So types of case study, this is not a previously asked question, but I'll just quickly go through it. Illustrative case studies, it's primarily descriptive case study, utilizing 1 or 2 instances of an event to show how a situation is. So it makes unfamiliar situations more familiar to the audience. So exploratory or pilot case studies is performed before implementing a large-scale investigation, which is the term pilot. So the basic function to help identify the right questions, select the right type of measurement before the main investigation. So sometimes what happens in the pilot itself, we may find good information which seem very convincing. So we may tend to release those as conclusion prematurely. Then cumulative case studies, so that actually accumulation, so it's one after the other you're collecting. Okay, so it's aggregating information from several sites at different times. So collection of past studies will allow great generalization without additional cost or time being expended on new and repetitive studies. So which is why cumulative case studies are also important. So they are done at different places at different times. Then critical instance case studies, that is examining 1 or more sites for examining a situation of unique interest. There could not be much scope for generalization or to challenge the general hypothesis, but this can actually answer certain unique cause-effect situations. Next is the steps for case study. This has also not been asked in the exam, but again this is also important because for all these, for every chapter in our block 2, we are having steps. Some of these have been asked, but case study, the steps have not been asked. So it's important to read it and be thorough with it, so that if this could be a new question, we could easily answer it. So mostly these steps come as a part 1 or a part 2 question, which means it's a good amount of marks that you can score from this. Okay, and this is slightly different from the steps of other methods. So step 1, determine the present status of the case or cases. So first step to determine the present status through direct observation. In addition to physical examination, psychological evaluation can also be conducted to determine the general ability level, etc. of a person. If we are trying to understand if somebody is a slow learner or somebody is having a certain behavioral issue. So we start by understanding the baseline or the current status, okay, through assessing physique, cognitive factors, through direct observation and psychological tests. So next step is identifying the most probable antecedents of the case. So antecedent means cause. So identifying the most probable cause, that is like an ex post facto research. So we are determining the most probable antecedents, and this helps to formulate a workable hypothesis. So example, in the case of a slow learner that we are trying to understand the present status of a slow learner, the researcher can formulate a hypothesis that occurrence of slow learning is due to unhealthy home environment. The text is given wrong, the spelling is wrong, so it is not unhealthy have environment, it is unhealthy home environment. So the hypothesis is that slow learning could be because of unhealthy home environment, bad study habits and poor teaching in school. Okay, so to identify the most probable causes. So that's the next step. Third step is verifying the hypothesis or the causes or antecedents. So then we check for the presence or absence of antecedents that are supposed to cause it. So in the example of slow learning, we are trying to do a multi-method approach, that is including observation, past history of the case, interview of the child, of the parents, of the teachers, etc., to understand if it is actually due to home environment or the bad study habits of the child or the poor teaching in the school. And then fourth is the diagnosis and remedial measure. So after we verify the antecedents or hypothesis, then we try to get to the diagnosis of the cause. So that is, if there is a slow learning, then we are going to try and suggest certain remedial measure to overcome these causes. Okay, and step 5 is follow up of the cases. So now we have understood the case and then we have told some remedial measure, and now we are going to see what is the impact. So the remedial measure was actually the independent variable. So after we understand the current status, understand the causes and verify which cause could be there, we are going to diagnose and give remedial measure. And now that is the independent variable here, that was the manipulation that we gave, and now we are going to try and find out how it has affected the slow learning or how it has affected the dependent variable. If there is a positive impact, which means that the diagnosis or the remedial measures that we had suggested in step 4 was correct, and if and then we can do a detailed study on that and maybe even use it as a generalized solution and tool for future. Okay, so all these are the steps. So determining the present status, identifying most probable antecedents, verifying antecedents or hypothesis, diagnosis and remedial measures, and follow-up of the cases. So these are the steps for doing a case study. The next topic is 4.6, ways of case studies. That's how the topic is given. It's wrong. So it is ways of analysis or use of case studies. So if we have case studies, how are we going to use it or analyze it? One is writing analysis. So most careful way to understand the case study is to, give it in writing, publish it in writing, so that people can read and understand what we have done as part of a case study. Second is panel of experts. So which means we have a panel who will be sharing their sharing the experiences with case studies, and then they can all of them can tell you, okay, maybe if you're talking about learning experiences, slow learning, fast learning, photographic memory, all of these are connected. So panel of experts who can present about all these different various so the panel of experts will be sharing all these various case studies, different ones that they have done, and then everyone else can understand how these different case studies can be used. The next is analysis of similar cases. So here it's kind of similar to the panel of experts, but here there's a group who studied one type of case study but at different places with different samples. So for example, slow learning, multiple people have studied slow learning, so there could be different reasons that have come out or different ways in which the variations have worked out, the variables have worked out, or the diagnostic measures or remedial measures have turned out. So all of these can be studied together, and then maybe this could also help to generalize what can work in terms of slow learning. The fourth is cross-examination. So the members prepare in advance the group members prepare in advance certain questions on a particular case study, and then with all these details that the researcher presents, they ask questions and they further analyze what could have gone right, what could have been wrong, and then understand the situation or the case better. So the last topic is misconception about case study. This is also a very important topic because it's been asked in the exams before. So even though case study is one of the research methods, there are still certain misconceptions. Like we said in the beginning, it is not considered really effective in certain cases. So that is why we have certain misconceptions. So the first and foremost is that the theoretical knowledge that is gained from case study cannot actually contribute to scientific development because this cannot be generalized. This is a misconception because it's not true. A lot of the information from case studies can actually help for future. So this is a misconception. The case study is actually useful for generating hypothesis, but not for testing hypothesis or theory building. This is also a misconception because we can do certain hypothesis building and building of theories from this. Then case study may affect the bias tendency towards variation, towards verification. That is the tendency to confirm the researcher's preconceived notions. For example, if I'm studying slow learning and if I think that poor parenting is the reason, and if I do the study and then I happen to see a case where poor parenting is actually the reason, I may, because of my preconceived bias that poor parenting itself is the reason, and then I saw this also in my case study, I may tend to verify this data and ignore all other possible causes. So that can happen. Is a misconception because it need not always happen, because being a researcher, I know that there are certain pitfalls for the case study, or there are certain pitfalls for the method that I'm using. So as a researcher, it is my duty to be knowledgeable that bias can happen, and hence I need to be away from bias. So this is also a misconception. And then sometimes it is difficult to summarize and develop generalization. So that's also not true, especially in case of exceptions. When we have certain exception behavior or deviant behavior, we definitely need case study to generalize those kind of deviant behavior. So that's also a misconception. So I'm again repeating the misconceptions because this has been asked for the exam. So the first misconception is that case study cannot contribute to scientific development because it is not generalizable. Second is case study is useful for generating hypothesis but not for testing hypothesis or for theory building. Third is that the case study may affect the bias tendency, the researcher's bias tendency towards verification. And the fourth is that sometimes it is difficult to summarize and develop general propositions and theories based on case studies which are specific. So with this, we come to the end of block 2, unit 4, which is case study. So now we will meet in the third block. I welcome you all to the third block and happy studying. Thank you.